Hey, what up Seekers? Welcome back. In this video, the second video in the series of Jung and Jewish Mysticism, if you want to see the first video, click right here. We are going to talk about Kabbalistic ideas that make their way into Jungian thought. We're then going to have a look at specifically Lurianic Kabbalistic ideas that make their way into Jung's ideas, and then we're going to look at some Kabbalistic ideas that would have been compatible with Jungian thought, that really should have made it in but did not, and speculate on why that happened. So, from the 1940s onwards, something happens interestingly in Jung's thought, which is a bit of a change from his previous MO, where he begins quoting freely from Kabbalistic texts. And he begins to focus on alchemical ideas, which he had been up until then, but ones that are specifically influenced by or compatible with Kabbalistic imagery and ideas. A case in point is one of Jung's last great works, Mysterium Coniunctionis. I don't think anyone actually knows how to pronounce that title correctly, which was completed in Jung's 80th year in 1954. And although ostensibly it is a treatise on alchemy, it is jam-packed with Kabbalistic ideas, and this is what we find. Number 1. Adam Kadmon, the primordial man, primordial Adam. The concept of the primordial Adam is the one who contains within themselves the raging, conflicting spirits that are found within the human spirit. This primordial being that contains the composite of all later conflicting, tumultuous energy that a human can manifest. In Latin, the place of harmony between these conflicting energies is called the coincidente oppositorum, the coincidence of opposites. Adam Kadmon embodies the 10 sphirot, the 10 archetypes, through which the world was created. Jung reflects in detail on this Kabbalistic notion, noting that a cosmic primordial man is a symbol that finds itself expressed throughout the world's creation myths. And for Jung, Adam Kadmon is the symbol for the self, capital S. Number 2. Along with this idea is the notion of the Sephirot, the archetypes of creation, the modes of divine expression, and Jung sees these clearly as corresponding in parallels to his own archetypes of creation. Number 3 is the notion of divine sparks, the Nitzutzim. In Latin, Jung refers to them as the scintillae. It are these sparks that are contained within humanity, which have to be raised back up to their pleroma, to their divine realm. And we'll speak about this as we get down the list. Number 4 is a personal favorite. It is the notion of disillusion in the service of reconstitution and restoration. The necessity of a certain inner death to give way to rebirth. The rotting seed of crucifixion, which sprouts and blossoms in the spring in its resurrection. This is referred to by Jung, amongst other metaphors, with the alchemical metaphor of the process of solve et coagula, to dissolve for the purpose of coagulating, of reconstituting and reuniting. And in Kabbalah as the process of shira followed by tikkun on the cosmic level, and bitul followed by dvekut on the personal spiritual level. Number 5 is the theory of unifications, particularly between that of good and evil, and the unification of masculine and feminine. Not to equate those two unions, by the way. Referred to in Kabbalah as the Yichud Kutsha Brichu Shchinte, the union of the Holy One and his Shekhinah, the feminine aspect or bride of God, the divine wedding, again repeating this theme of the union of opposites, the coincidente oppositorum. Jung interpreted these ideas psychologically and saw them as pointing to the union between the anima and the animus, the masculine and feminine spirits within every human, which he saw as a prerequisite for individuation and psychological growth. And Jung explored this notion of the divine marriage really extensively in his work. This wedding symbolism, the unification of the various sphirot, which finds its source mostly in the Zohar, was a great preoccupation of many of the alchemists, which Jung himself studied and cherished. When we get to talk more extensively about Jung's relationship to alchemy and Gnosticism, and that relationship to Kabbalah, we'll get to pin down more precisely the concrete historical figures where these ideas merge and come into Jung's thought. But having said that, these symbols of unity and union became pivotal notions around which Jung constructed his final formulation of his most seminal ideas, such as his understanding of the archetypes, the collective unconscious, and his theory of the ultimate psychological purpose of mankind. Now, a number of important Lurianic Kabbalistic ideas also make their way into Jung's work, most specifically into his 1952 work, Answer to Job. Among these are the three important ideas. One, that God must have humanity as a partner for the fulfillment and completion of creation. Number two, as Jung says, whosoever knows God has an effect upon him. Number three, the idea that the worlds are born as a result of a union between the divine masculine and the divine feminine. I want to now talk about some Kabbalistic notions that either don't get mentioned by Jung at all or get mentioned very little, but which are very significant from a Jungian perspective. And these are, one, I have 6 ideas for you. Number 1 is the idea of the Ein Sof, literally the endless or the infinite, which would function for Jung conceptually in a way very similar to the way that he interpreted the Gnostic idea of the pleroma, the divine realm of fullness, the infinite unknowable depths of the collective unconscious. It's the chaotic unknown which unites within itself all of the polarities and all of the opposites of the human, and which humanity returns to time and again as a source of creation and desire. Number 2 is the concept of tzimtzum, divine contraction and concealment, the negation and withdrawal of God's infinite presence, which makes room for the world, the metaphysical prerequisite for a transition from the divine infinite to the worldly finite. It turns out that the original act of creation is an act of negation where the infinite withdraws and limits itself, making space conceptually for a finite realm. Jung makes no mention of the idea of tzimtzum. However, this notion of self-contraction and self-concealment can readily be understood as a psychological archetype for the limitation and repression which separates the ego from the unconscious. Number 3 is the klipot, the shells or the husks, which entrap the sparks of divine light, the nitzutzim, the scintilla, preventing them from serving their purpose in creation, and give rise to the negative realm known as sitra achra, the other side, literally. According to the Kabbalists, this evil realm is nevertheless still part of the divine, and must be given its due. The Kabbalistic notion of the sitra achra, the other side, has clear equivalence and parallel to Jung's notion of the shadow. The Kabbalists, like Jung, regarded the other side, the shadow, the baser instincts of the individual, as something that must be harnessed and integrated, thereby redeeming them, and not rejecting and repressing them. Concept number 4 is Shirat HaKelim, the shattering of the vessels, which refers to the archetypal event where the archetypes themselves shattered and fell throughout the cosmos as the sparks. Jung was fascinated by the Kabbalistic notions of Shvira and Tikkun, but he only chanced upon them later in his life, not allowing him to integrate them more thoroughly into his system of thought. Number 5 is the concept of Tikkun, restoration, the process by which humanity repairs and fixes the world. As we said, one of the results of Shirat HaKelim is the dispersal and descent of divine sparks into the souls of the individual, and in the Kabbalistic view, into the souls of all things on this earth. For the Kabbalists, the purpose of Tikkun, the purpose of the restoration, is for the individual to release, raise, and redeem these sparks, both within themselves and in the world around them, in order that both humanity and the world can fulfill their divine potential. Jung considered this theory of the sparks, the scintilla, as they appeared in Gnosticism, Kabbalah, and alchemy, and concluded that they represent an element of the primordial archetypal unconsciousness in mankind. Unfortunately, Jung was apparently unaware of the development of the nitzutz, the spark symbol, in later Kabbalah and Hasidism, where in contrast to most Gnostic understandings of the theory of the sparks, as a vehicle of escape from the world and the self, they were understood here as the opportunity for the development of the individual and a vehicle of engagement with the world. In Hasidism, each individual finds themselves on this planet because there is sparks which only they can redeem, both within themselves and within the world they encounter. And the ends of raising these sparks is the reunion of creation to a state of completed and perfected unity. The final and 6th concept on this list is the idea of the Partsufim, the faces or visages. Visages? I don't know how to pronounce that. Which are a plurality of archetypal personas through which the primordial atom must evolve in the process of tikkun. For Jung, this notion of raising the sparks, the evolution and perfection of Adam Kadmon, and the entire process of tikkun would have been ideal symbols for his idea of individuation. It's a shame that he didn't encounter them earlier. I think what we're discussing here should be fascinating really to anyone that's interested in Jungian thought, but I think it's particularly important for Jews that are interested in Jung, because despite Jung's astute observation that any cultured Jew is on their way to becoming a non-Jew, Jung remarked quite wisely that no one who is a Jew can become a human being without knowing that they're a Jew, since this is the basis from with which they can reach out towards a higher humanity. The same obviously is true and can be said for the Christian, the Muslim, the Buddhist, the Hindu, and the Zoroastrian, the Jain. We must each explore the depths of our own traditions, and only through exploring our own heritage, culture, our own source, can we find that door towards a higher, shared, collective humanity. It is not about going beyond our own individual traditions, but about going through them. Much love. Keep seeking. Oh, and of course, if you are interested in the subject, make sure if you're not already to subscribe and press the bell button for notifications, because we are going to be continuing this epic series on Jung and mystical thought, beginning with Jewish mysticism. Following, I think, in the next video, we're going to talk about actual things that Jung had to say about Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism and explore the meaning of those quite profound, quite grand, and quite obscure statements. Stay tuned. Love you. Keep seeking.